There we are. Good. Well, recording. Yeah. So very, very good morning, everybody. And as I say on the old YouTube teachings from before Zoom time, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. And so welcome. Now, this is the third of our 4 sessions on the Gampopa's 4 Dharmas. Now, I had a thought this morning, and I'm sorry, it's not quite solidified. So this normally would be the third of our 4 sessions on Gampopa's 4 Dharmas. It might be 5 sessions. I think I might cancel the 1 session, which is a summary of all of these, the 3 types of precious human being, because I don't want to rush the Bodhisattva part, which is going to happen if we just keep it to 4 sessions. So let me think about that. And I don't think it's going to break any hearts if I cancel the just the one-off session. I can do that another time. So anyway, a very warm welcome. And let's start today, because we have a lot to do, a lot to do. Let's start today with a wonderful mind, a very, very big mind. Let your mind stretch out without any limit, without any restriction, to embrace in the deepest love every single living being, and to embrace in the deepest respect the Buddha mind, which is what we are, which is what we're going to become. And let's long to become Buddhas, to help everyone and see these studies, all this intake of information as part of what we need to nourish our journey to enlightenment. In the couple of mail outs this week, I sent you, because some people ask, what are the prayers at the beginning and at the end? So if you want to join in, please do, but don't turn your sound on, because it never coordinates. It's absolute cacophony. So please join in at home, but not online. I think something like a Tara practice with people on Zooms from different places is one of the most cacophonous things you can ever hear. Anyway. Sonje chodon soje chonamla jancho bado dane chamsunje dagi jinso jipe sanamje drola penchira sonje dropara sho semchen tamche dewa dang dewe jodang dempara joche dongal dang dongal je jodang chalwara joche dongal mepen dewa dampa dang men chalwara joche nieren chadan netan chalwe tanyom chempola ne para joreche Deyantan shame shamawati shameta shachum am kore marazite karota kaya ore tejowati oloyani bishudani male malapanaye kokore ka grase grasana o muki paramuki amuki shametani sawa graha bandanane nigrihita sawa pa Prawadina Vimukta Marapasha Satapita Buddha Mudra Anugatita Salomare Putsarita Pare Shude Begasantu Savamara Kamane Palan Sawe Lama Rimboche Dage Chewara Pende Denshona Kadren Jempo Gone Jezonte Kuson Toje Ngadrop Salado So. So we have 4 Dharmas of Gampopa. The Dharmas become Dharma, and Dharma becomes a path. And that path is the clearing of delusion, and delusions manifest primordial wisdom. A lot of it's about the path. So when we talk about a path, What do we mean? A path takes you from where you are to somewhere else. So what is the somewhere else? In the first line, we don't talk about path. There we're mainly talking about the good Buddhist intent on practicing good karma. But once we get to the second type, and even for the good Buddhist and the third type of precious human being, then we're very much talking about a path. A path. In every case where that path is going, has a common element, especially in what we're leaving behind, suffering. So whether we are a precious human ordinary being, let's say, not yet committed to enlightenment or to full liberation, but very, very aware of karma and the power and the beauty and the purity of Dharma and of the Buddha. If we are that kind of person, our path is taking us out of the suffering that we caused by our past harmful karma, and the nature of harmful karma is like a double punch. As we hurt others, we hurt ourselves. Put the image in your mind. I didn't do it too hard because I might knock myself out on screen. Once in France, we had a weather presenter who had a stroke in the middle of doing the weather. It was very, very dramatic. He started not finding his words. Then he collapsed and they had to turn the camera off and react. So what I want to do is boom, like this, but this one is the most important. When we hurt others at the same time, we are hurting ourselves because it comes back. There's a time delay, so it's more like boom, boom. But the second boom is bound to come. So our first type of precious human being feels the pain of suffering, and especially suffering as suffering. Remember, we had three types of suffering: manifest suffering, and an awareness of the suffering of change through the power of karma. And so they are moving away from their path, is a moving away from making more harmful karma. And they're going to a state of less suffering, a better future life. Last week, we went to our second type of precious human being. And their path is going to freedom from suffering forever. Forever. You see, even if you make excellent karma, it's still called tainted karma. Because as long as there is ego and duality involved, even though you do good things and help other people and every part of you is such a kind, good, generous human being, still you will be reborn. And you cannot be reborn without birth, aging, sickness, and death. Even if you have a good life and you have good health and wealth and friends and all the good things, it comes with a price tag. So the second type of precious human being wants to get out of all suffering forever. This is why we have great respect for them. It's a wonderful goal and achievement. So we saw last week that this second type has two labels, Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, and we looked a bit at these unusual characters called Pratyeka Buddhas. So now I need, for the sake of defining this path, I need to define them, because that definition is useful later when we come to the Bodhisattva to see the defining characteristics of each and why the Buddha taught the Shravaka way to the Shravakas and why the Buddha taught the Bodhisattva way to the Bodhisattvas and didn't just teach the Bodhisattva way to everybody. We don't have time to explore this in detail, but it's very important some other day or in your own studies. So with the Shravakas, the basic mentality in the scriptures said, and if you were a Buddhist teacher or if you were the Buddha, this is what you'd be looking for when somebody comes in your door for an interview. 3 characteristics which mean, this person, this is a Shravaka potential. 1, they have revulsion for samsara. We did this last week. They're fed up, had enough, don't want any more. But then not just that, they have secondly a real belief in nirvana. They think there is a possibility of ending suffering forever, and reaching a state of peace which won't be temporary, but which will be freedom forever. So they reject samsara, they believe in nirvana, and the third defining characteristic is that by nature they don't have much compassion. It doesn't mean they're without compassion or they're without love, but it's not dominant in their character. What they do have, because of this revulsion from samsara and a belief that the mind can be pure and peaceful, what they do have is a lot of love and compassion for themselves, and that's already wonderful. Many of us don't. Many of us don't yet know how to love and care for our mind, which is everything we are. So they just long to get out, and by nature, their mind is not out there for other people. When we come to the Bodhisattvas, we find that by nature we mean through the power of many past lives. The Bodhisattvas are naturally aware of others, what's going on, how they hurt, they want to help them. Their mind is out there. The characteristic of the Shravakas is that their mind is mainly centered on their own case, on themselves. It's great. This gives them the ability to really investigate themselves when they come to do their practice. So then the characteristic of the Pratyeka Buddhas are those 3, the rejection of samsara, the longing for nirvana, and not naturally having a big bank of love and compassion. But on top of that, they have a great deal of self-confidence, because, as we saw last week, of lifetimes and lifetimes of naturally picking up their meditation inheritance from past lives. And so it's just so true. As they look around, all they see is the truth of Dharma, and they're very confident. They meet regular human beings, other people, maybe even other Buddhists, who are still haven't got it from inside. The pen is not dropped about suffering, about ego, and so on. So they're very, very confident. Secondly, it says they keep quiet about their teachers. So even though from time to time they have teachers and they learn, they don't go around telling people, oh, it's a wonderful teacher and I learned this. They tend to keep stuff to themselves. Now, we don't explore this today, but when we do explore it, we see that of the 3 refuges, their main refuge is Dharma. And in terms of people like us, what's the clue is where your main interest is the information. I've got to get the goodies. I've got to get the information. I've got to get the technique, the method. Okay, you get it from a teacher, but that's secondary. It's, it's the teacher just carries something that I want. Because these are naturally loners, the Pratyeka Buddhas, they're not interested so much in the Sangha, refuge, and the community and sharing. But they love Dharma and the information. So that's their second characteristic, is they keep quiet about their teachers. And so what do we get? Their loners. So last week, thank you, Neil, for reminding me, we saw that one of them are called like rhinoceros. They're the Pratyeka Buddhas who like to be on their own. And then the other one, the Pratyeka Buddhas who like to be together, but with very, very select company like themselves. They're called the parrot-like. So we've got the rhinoceros-like and the parrot-like, the parrots, because parrots tend to gather together in small groups, I think. So anyway, then with this second type, then their view, which we touched on last week, view, practice, conduct, result. Their view is that all the suffering comes from the delusion of ego, self. And their view is there is no ego. Instead, there is an ongoing mind stream made of 5 different types of element called the 5 skandhas, the 5 aggregates. Forms that appear in the mind, feelings about those forms, a cognitive process that recognizes the forms, labels them, thinks about them. Samskaras, all sorts of mental activity related around those first 3, and then consciousness through the 5 sense doors and then in the mind. So we are an ongoing, ever-changing, impermanent stream of consciousness, but there is no fixed ego. And because people feel solid like me, then they suffer. So that's their view. So based on that, what is their practice, their meditation? Is to get rid of that delusion, ego, that causes all the suffering. And how do they do that in their practice? They need to fuse 2 things, meditation and wisdom. So their practice, primarily, their practice on their seat. Remember, practice or meditation is what you do with yourself when you're by yourself. Conduct is what you do in relation to the world and other people. So what they do with their mind, and they're very concerned for saving their own mind, is to bring the mind to utter stillness through excellent, excellent shamatha practice. And this is why we respect them, because their shamatha is... I had for a long time a very dear Spanish friend, photographer, filmmaker, and she had this expression. So the shamatha of the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas is, you can't get better shamatha than that. One-pointed, undistracted, and when we study it in detail, it takes them through the first absorption level, which is very, very deep and brings many qualities. And then from there to the second dhyana, it's called, from there to the third dhyana, and from there to the fourth dhyana. And then they add to that 4 formless meditations. We're not going there today, but they're in the Karma teachings on, it's called immobility karma, meditation karma. So they bring their mind to utter stillness, and the mind can be totally one-pointedly absorbed in itself. And then in that state of stillness, which is the meditation component, they bring in wisdom. And the wisdom is of the 4 truths of realized beings, the 4, people usually call them noble truths. So as they're aware of their mind, they become aware of how the mind poisons are based in a delusion of ego. I hate that. I want that. I don't like him because he's got what I want. And I'm proud, and so on. They see the ego delusion is not just one thing. It's always the I thought accompanying the mind poisons, and that's what causes all the harm. to ensue. So they're dismantling in their mind all of the mechanisms, their history that led them into suffering, so that there's nothing left but peace. So in their stillness, distraction, as the distractions of history come up, gone, get rid of it, bin it, until there's nothing left but peace. That's their practice. And then their conduct, which we won't go into the details today because time goes by too quickly. And that's why I sent you a piece of paper and you can refer to it. But when Gyaltsab Rinpoche taught this in Dublin, he outlined, because these are nearly all monastics, you see. So their conduct is going to help their mind get rid of ego. They're going to leave the world and either go into hermitages or live in solitude, away from the temptations of other people's bodies and food and stuff and houses or whatever it is. You just get away from it all and go inside your mind, however best you can. So then you have 12 basic precepts, 12 basic thrusts to what they're doing. You've got them in your piece of paper. So now I know you've got it, I can tell you. So it's in the teaching. So they only take whatever food's offered. They go begging. And if you get a lot, you have to eat a lot, whether you like it or not. If you don't get much, then that's tough luck. You don't get much. If you get food you can't stand, tough luck. If you get nice food, well, that's a good day, but you don't think too much about it. So they have to eat. Sometimes people say, well, the early Buddhist vegetarian. They're not allowed to pick and choose when they go begging. They can't say, oh, I'll have a bit of that. No, not that one. If people put meat in their bowl, they have to eat meat. Yeah? So that's the first thing. They only eat once a day, one meal a day, and that has to be before midday. The idea is that the afternoon and all the rest of the day is free to study and meditate. They mustn't, if they receive gifts, they mustn't resell them. Let's not go there, but there's an awful lot to be said about this. Anyway, they get their mind out of attachment to appearances by just having their 3 Dharma robes. They have to accept for those robes whatever material is offered. And so if you're in that monastic world, you have to be careful of, okay, you've only got 3 robes, but you can get nice material and you can stitch it nicely and so on and so on. The whole idea is you're not involved with clothes. And the Buddha wore rags. It's quite amazing now. We have a stylized form that abbots and other people wear, very neatly stitched together patches of cloth. What it meant was the Buddha just picked up rags and bits of cloth, put them together any old how, and that was good enough as long as it covered the body. And then to live in a hermitage. Now, the word in the old days actually meant a place far away from people, a place that's naturally quiet, conducive to meditation, without hustle and bustle. And of course, as the years and the centuries went by, monasteries became places with their own hustle and bustle. And so they're often called by Buddhist lamas white samsara, because in a monastery is a whole microcosmic world of territories and, So anyway, to live in a hermitage, or better, the next thing, number 7, is get away from a hermitage and live in the wilds. Live beneath trees, live underneath rocks, in caves. And then, better than that, don't just live in the wild, live in wild, scary places that remind you about impermanence. So charnel grounds, we don't have those very much. It doesn't mean a very neat cemetery with tombstones. It means like you can still, I remember when I was in Nepal in the 80s, people who couldn't afford to get rid of a dead body just left it by the side of the road. So you go sitting next to dead bodies and you just meditate with the smell and the putrefaction in front of your eyes to remind you that your wonderful, timeless mind is at the moment living in this human suit, which is a human body, and what's going to become of it, and the mind goes on when life ends. And then not to sleep in the first or the last part of the night, so that you've got lots of time for meditation, and so on. So we've got the rules. I don't want to spend more time on those. That's the conduct. It's the life of the renunciate, the life of the ascetic. So then if they meditate in that way, practice and have their conduct in that way, what's the most result they can expect? They become what we call an arhat. An arhat in the Tibetan translation means someone who defeated the enemy. And the enemy is Mara. The enemy is suffering. The enemy is the causes of suffering. So they did it. Arhat means they actually did it. Wonderful. And for the details, we get 4 types of arhats, got nice names. Arhats with remains, arhats without remains, ornamented arhats and unornamented arhats. That's sort of weird. But anyway, if we take the life of the Buddha, according to the Shravaka understanding, then when the Buddha became enlightened at the age of 35, he had got rid of all of the causes of suffering in his mind stream. That's what enlightenment meant. And so his mind was clear and enlightened. All the causes of suffering, the ignorance, the mind poisons, gone even in their finest, most subtle shades, forever. No more causes of suffering, completely free. But for the next 45 years until he died, there were still some remaining results from past karma. That's why he could still be alive. Those results were keeping his human body alive. That's why he could still get hassles, assassination attempts, calumny attempts, to break away of one of his dearest friends, his cousin Devadatta, to form at the beginning a Buddhist group bigger than his own. How could all that happen if he was enlightened? Because he still had remaining causes of suffering. So the Buddha, when he got enlightened, was an arhat with remains, with remaining causes of suffering. And when the Buddha passed into parinirvana, not nirvana, but parinirvana at the end of his life, not only all the causes of suffering were gone, but all of the results too. So nothing left, nothing left. The whole personal story in every tiniest detail finished. Arhat with remains, without remains. And then arhat, not the Buddha now, but those who become arhats, which aren't Buddhas, they're arhats. Without ornaments means they are free totally from karma and suffering. But it stops there. Some, so that's without ornaments. Those with ornaments or adornments are the ones who, beside having got their mind totally out of suffering, have many skillful qualities. These are mainly the Pratyeka Buddhas who've mastered so much knowledge about karma, cause and effect, the 12 links of interdependence, that they have very powerful ability. Now, the arhats and the Shravakas, the Pratyeka Buddhas, remember it said that by nature they're not rich in compassion, but they have love and compassion, and the way they help others is mainly through example. The fact that somebody is in the forest and sitting and meditating sets an example for others. It says in some of the scriptures, even bands of monkeys would come and see Pratyeka Buddhas sitting so perfectly, and they'd just feel the stillness of the mind, and then the monkeys would sit down. There's even a story of one monkey that was so good at that, once it went somewhere else, and Buddhists saw this monkey sitting so good and in a state of peace that the human Buddhists copied the monkey. because the monkey had seen a Pratyeka Buddha doing this. So anyway, let's leave it there. Let's leave it there. And I want to zoom out for a moment before we go on to the Bodhisattvas to talk about something very important for all of us. And this is about for our first type of precious human being, the good Buddhist. The second type, the Shravaka, the Pratyeka Buddha. And the third type, the Bodhisattva. And even later, the Vajrayana practitioner. One power of mind, which will be your best friend. And that we need to think about in depth and at length as we become more mindful of how we think, how we feel, how we react, who we are. It is the power of commitment. And this manifests in an outer level as vows, refuge vow, the 5 Buddhist key precepts, monks and nuns vows, the Bodhisattva vow, Vajrayana tantric vows, samaya. They're the outer manifestation of an inner commitment, whereby this mind of ours, which is so complicated, so unreliable, such a mixture of wonderful things and rather embarrassing things, this mind of ours finds within itself the power to say no, never again to some things, and yes, as a clear intention of this is where I'm going. This life, future lives, commitment to the path, to what you want to become in your future. And commitment to certain personal values where you define yourself, you make boundaries, and so on. So in general, this power of understanding promises. Now, promises, vows, commitments have 2 levels. One is called the natural commitment, and the other is called the artificial commitment. So let's look at the natural commitment first, and let's take something very simple like not killing any other living being. At one point in our journey, and I'm sure for many of us it's already happened, you just could not harm the life of another being, no matter how small or whatever type of being it is. You are aware of it, of its life. You have a respect for life. And the ahimsa, the knowledge that we must never harm another life, becomes so natural that you would rather die yourself than hurt another being with your body, with your speech. So when you just couldn't lie, you couldn't steal, you couldn't whatever it is, the harmful things, that's called the natural vow. But that comes when it comes. It's natural. It's natural, so it comes when it comes. Until that time, we help ourselves towards the natural vow, and we work with our own weakness by taking artificial vows. We take a precept, we take 2 precepts. And so what I sent you was a sheet of the main vows from Refuge onwards, so we can see how we help ourselves by committing ourselves with great determination. Now, in order to do this, Buddhism is very wise. It realizes, what should I say, New Year resolutions. They're kind of famous, right? On the 1st of January, you decide this year for certain, no. And then by the 3rd of April, you've blown it. You've revised it. You've modified your intention. Good intentions, well, there's something. So understanding the unreliable, vacillating nature of the human mind, then when we take Buddhist commitments, we make a big deal of it. You do it in a sacred place. You're in a temple. You do it with other people. So you didn't just do it privately one day, making a New Year resolution. People saw you, and you were there with this one and that one. And then you take the vow from somebody who's a holy being, and somebody who's actually an example, who's been keeping that vow. You take the Bodhisattva vow from a Bodhisattva. You take refuge from somebody who conveys the strength of refuge. And then you prepare yourself for the vow. Normally, a good teacher prepares you for the vow, so that when you take it, it's not just something you did. It was a big deal. And now at last, yep, I can do this. I'm going to do it. And you're in there. And you are taking refuge, or you're taking a precept, or you're taking the Bodhisattva vow, or a tantric commitment. So putting all those things together helps us through all of those solemn, sacred factors to feel we did something huge. And that will help us in times of weakness, when we might crack and lose our commitment, to remember the wonderful teacher we took the vow with, and our own pure heart when we took it, and so on. So vows, precepts are big in Dharma, and you might not like all the stuff that goes with them. You might not like ceremonies in temple and kneeling down and going blah, blah, blah with the rest of people. And, it's not everyone's cup of tea, but there's a reason for it, to help us with our own weakness. So what I sent you was the refuge. Now, I think nearly all of us have taken refuge. And what most people don't know is the small print, like on the back of the contract that's in pale blue lettering and tiny letters. If you've taken refuge, then normally there are 9 commitments that go with refuge. So I sent you the list of those. They're not difficult. They're fairly easy to maintain, but we should all be aware of them and try our very best to keep them. And then the 5 precepts: not killing, not stealing, not lying, no sexual misconduct, no intoxicants. Normally, as Buddhists, we take at least one of those for the rest of our lives. They're very helpful. And I mean, the question is, somebody's hesitating. Oh, I see you still want to steal? All right, well then don't take the vow. Or you still want to hurt somebody with your sexual activity? Oh, okay. You still want to kill other beings? Okay. Of course we don't. But taking the commitment means that we are committing ourselves to much more mindfulness later on. So anyway, the 5 precepts, then you don't need to be a monk or a nun. You don't need to be on the Bodhisattva path. Any Buddhist can take those after refuge, and they're very helpful. And then I've made the list of some of the other vows. Now, let's go back to the bigger picture. There is the natural vow, just comes because of your state of mind, where you couldn't do this anymore and you must do this afterwards. But then there is the power of vows. Now, this is a very relevant thing because it addresses a question that many people do ask. And it's that, what's the point of going through some ceremony, artificially taking a promise? Naturally, I wouldn't harm another being. I wouldn't kill another being, sort of. Although you might get tested when it comes to mosquitoes or fleas or whatever it is. There's a difference, and this is very clearly underlined in the Buddha's teaching, between a person with a vow and a person without a vow. And please think about this. If a person doesn't have the vow of not killing, then they get the good karma of not killing every time they refrain. So when the mosquito lands and you would be very, very tempted to do something, you say, no, Ken, no, no, no. Lovely mosquito, former mummy mosquito, Om Mani Padme Hum. Every time you refrain from killing, you get the good karma in however many seconds it lasts of not killing, of refraining from harm when there is a tendency to harm. But only for those few seconds. Then it's gone. Then your mind, your karma, your activity is engaged in something else. So you get a few seconds of good karma here, a few seconds of good karma there, a few seconds of bad karma there, and so on. When you have a vow, from the moment you take it until the moment you break it, or the moment it ends because it was for one day or for so many years, the power of the good karma and the power of refraining from harmful karma is every moment. And what the Buddha says is, even if you are asleep, even if you fainted and you're totally unconscious, your mind is making good karma. Can you see the difference? Of course you can. From continuously generating good karma to just having it in the moments when your mind is positive. How this works is really, really interesting. And of course, we don't have time to go into that today, but it's about what your mind stream is and what colors your mind stream. And your mind stream in particular has very solid notions of me. They've caused all the suffering, amongst other things. So when we take a commitment, we're being very clever because we are using that solid notion of me to say, me not going to do this anymore. Me from now on will do this. And so that deep conviction, as every time we think about, so I'm someone who's taken refuge. I'm a Buddha. I'm a Bodhisattva now. This ongoing strength in the mind is said to be like planting the root of a tree or a bush. Once it's planted, then it just grows and grows and grows and produces more and more fruit. So anyway, I just wanted to say that briefly about why we take vows, and that this power of commitment in the mind is absolutely wonderful. So now today we need to go on to our third type of precious human being. So this is before we had, for the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, the Dharma became a path, the path to freedom from suffering. A path based on the view that ego is the root of all suffering. A path of practice based on cultivating the four truths within shamatha. But now when we go on to the Bodhisattva, we're looking at a sort of different type of potential. So where to start? Because there's so much. We had a quick look at Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas in terms of they're revolted by samsara, they long for nirvana, and they have little compassion. Now, when we look at the Bodhisattva, and we get a kind of a snapshot or a brief definition, then mainly, how are they different? They have, from their past lives, an ongoing connection with the Bodhisattva mind. They've practiced the Bodhisattva way before, and in their past lives, they have cultivated in their mind stream, which is ongoing into this life, they've cultivated love and compassion. That's great. So, and that's why the Buddha, just like a good Dharma teacher or the Buddha recognizes, this one's ready for the Shravaka path, but they don't have a lot of love and compassion. They're not ready for the Bodhisattva path. So the Buddha or a good teacher recognizes, feels, knows the past history and former lives of being a Bodhisattva. So it says, as we come into this life and as we grow up and go through life's story, determined, written by karma, then our Bodhisattva potential is one of two things. It's either awakened or it's still asleep. And this is the gift of a good teacher, is that even if you're not obviously yet a Bodhisattva, they'll recognize, a sleeping Bodhisattva. And so they've got to wake up the Bodhisattva in you. Whereas if you were a Shravaka type of person, they couldn't wake up the Bodhisattva potential yet, because it just isn't there. And what you do in teaching love and compassion and having a mind that cares for endless beings and puts them first and so on, you just scare the pants off somebody. They would feel, I can't do this. I can't cope with this part. And when they tried it, they'd fail. It's just not wise. So one has this Bodhisattva potential, but it's either awakened or not yet awakened. So when we come to that, why, even if you've got that potential from quite a few past recent lives of being a Bodhisattva, why may it not be awakened yet? And we see 4 obstacles to keep you a sleeping Bodhisattva. Yeah. So you're not yet woke up. One of them is you've been born into unfavorable circumstances. You're born to a family, you're born to a culture, you're born in a time in history which is not going to magnetize the awakening of your Bodhisattva mind very easily. Maybe you're born into a different faith. Maybe you're born into all sorts of things. The rebirth is unfavorable. That can happen. So your Bodhisattva potential is on hold. Another reason it might not be awakened is, yes, you've been a Bodhisattva in past lives. Yeah, but you didn't do it too powerfully. And you gave yourself lots of leeway. And you did quite a bit of samsara on the side. So your Bodhisattva potential is kind of mitigated with other things. And those things can be very, very strong. I remember one of my first teachers in 1970 in Dharamsala, Gelugpa Tulku. And he said to me, Ken, it's rather strange. The Buddha teaches us impermanence, so we know we can go any day, can go tomorrow, and life is impermanent. He said, but when you practice, please practice as though you've got all the time in the world, and this time round you're going to get it right. You're not going to rush it, you're not going to fudge it, you're going to do a really perfect job as though you've got all the lifetime, so you've got all the time in the world. It was very good advice. Very, very good advice. So sometimes, second point says, we lack habitual tendency. So we can find ourselves, in the end, we meet the Bodhisattva teachings, but our minds are whole conflicting stuff of be in the world, be a Bodhisattva, and it's an inner tussle that we have to sort out. Good luck if that's the case. And there's probably a bit of this in all of us. The third thing is that even though we were born in good circumstances, and we've got the the past habitual tendencies, we can get drawn into dodgy stuff. We meet people who are iffy, maybe not Buddhists at all. Something's very attractive or very powerful. It could be anything, spiritual knowledge of one sort or another, magic, and stuff that can really fascinate us and keep our mind away from the basic point of suffering and freedom from suffering. We get fascinated with power, with knowledge, with all sorts of things, or money, simply with money. We just want to make more and more money. We feel must have money, must have material things. I can't be happy without so much. And then, oh yeah, okay, well, we're tricking the government or dealing in dodgy goods. We get drawn into something and it becomes addictive. And then we can't get out of it. Or we make, while we're doing it, heavy duty karma that we then need to purify before the Bodhisattva mind can really fire up strongly. And then the last thing is is similar, but instead of we get caught up out there with people and situations and things which are harmful, dark, negative, we can be in Dharma circumstances, good Dharma centers with good teachers, but inside ourselves from past lives, we have a strong propensity for what can wreck our practice. Lust, anger, and so on. The mind poisons. And then particularly if we're on a powerful path, we're not going there this week, but I would like to mention it just a bit. What can happen is there's you and your guru. It's lovely. And you have faith and devotion, and you receive the nectar of the Dharma, and you're swimming like a happy fish in the Dharma waters. But then, as Dharma does what it has to do, which deals with your history, and it comes up, and if you have these powerful mind poisons, then you will start, and it's like in people in therapy, but 100 times stronger, you will start seeing fault in the guru. When the fault's not there, but you can't see that, because rather than face your own negativity, you'd much rather blame something out there and say, bloody Tibetan Buddhism, I can't stand it. All it does is this. And, oh, I thought he was, I thought that Lama, I thought he cared for me and all of this, but look, he's not even looking at me nice. Doesn't smile at me anymore. And, but he smiles at that other person. And why did I get into this? What am I doing sitting here playing a drum and a bell and going blah, blah, in a language I don't understand? What the hell? All sorts of confusing stuff happens, which is why in Vajrayana practice, the purity of devotion, the 100,000 prostrations and refuges is so important, so that those kind of mind poison tricks don't catch us by the ankle and pull us down. We see them coming. It hurts to deal with them, but we keep the ring and the hook of faith and devotion and the Guru's blessing there. And it's blooming difficult, but you make it through and you realize what a fool you are making of yourself and how twisted we can see everything because of our ego that doesn't want to die. So that fourth thing, to be afflicted by obscurations, is one of the reasons why in past lives, even though we've got quite a good bodhisattva potential, we blew it in previous lives. This life, we're going to get it right. So if we've got those, we know those four obstacles, how can we overcome them? That's what we need to know. So it says, out there, you make sure you get the right input from good Dharma teachers. So you need to find reliable, pure, authentic Dharma teachers who teaches what the Buddha taught in a way that suits you. You're getting the right input from your teachers. And then in particular, we connect with, in the end, with a path and a lineage that will actually nourish us the best. We entrust ourselves to it out there. But then whatever is out there, and even if you've got the Karmapa or the greatest teacher out there, in here, our second factor is that we nurture what we know is helpful. We nourish, we feed our devotion, the three types of faith, the faith of certainty, and the faith of aspiration, and the faith which is clarity. We need to understand what they are, nourish them. We do things like taking refuge from the heart as much as we can, Bodhisattva vow from the heart 6 times a day, and so on and so on. So in here, we need to, through mindfulness, to know in our own mind which parts of our mind are our good friends and which part of our mind and our history are not really helpful and can be a source of danger. And we nourish the good parts. So when the growing better part of ourself meets with the right input from out there, then we can make sure that these 4 obstacles don't get in our way this time round. So then you are an awakened Bodhisattva. Your potential is awakened. So what does this mean? What are your mind characteristics? There's some very nice quotes in the scriptures. Let me find one here. There's one, it's called Dasika Dharma Sutra, 10 Dharma Sutra. It says, what do these bodhisattvas look like? You know, how do you recognize one? It says, never rough or rude, beyond any deceit towards others or hypocrisy in themselves, and full of love for all beings. They are bodhisattvas. And then Gampopa tells us these people are naturally loving and kind and without contrivance, peaceful in what they do, peaceful in what they say. They are loving and joyful in their relations to others. Now, this is part of the story, is sort of how anyone can recognize one. But actually, that is the awakened potential, but they are not yet a bodhisattva. Now, this is important, and it's a point I make often, but I'd like to make again. When somebody is a kind human being, often I hear my Buddhist friends say, oh, he's a real bodhisattva, or she's a real bodhisattva. And inside myself, I'm saying, no, they're not. They're a real kind person. They're a real good person. But please, this word bodhisattva is so wonderful. If you're going to use it knowing what it means. If somebody is a kind person, say it, they're a kind person. If somebody is full of love in everything they do, they're somebody who's full of love in whatever they do. But what is a bodhisattva? We come back to commitment. Ideally, natural commitment. If not, artificial commitment. And it's someone who's taken the bodhisattva vow. You're not a bodhisattva until you've committed yourself to the bodhisattva path from the depths of your heart. What does that mean? It means that your heart is set on enlightenment. Why? Because you long to help everyone the most And you realize out of the whole of human history on this planet, which human being helped others more than any other? And Buddha. Do the sums, do the statistics. In Buddha's life, he helped hundreds of thousands of people directly through establishing the teachings in a way which would last for 5,000 years. Buddha indirectly established what has helped billions of people, and through them becoming bodhisattvas, loving, kind, caring, committed people, they've helped others. The effects are incalculable. Think of any other human being and ask yourself, when I do the sums, how many people have they benefited through their life? How many? So this is the logical, clear-minded thing. If I really want to help others, okay, I can go down the road and, do this, do that. That's helpful for a few just now. But if I really want to help as many beings as possible in this life, and more, as we saw in the 5 paths, life after life, I need to set my heart on the one motive force that makes you able to help others, and that is a good mind and a good heart and a pure mind and a good heart. We call that Enlightenment Buddha. So setting your heart on enlightenment, a Buddha's enlightenment, not the state of Arhat, a Buddha's enlightenment for the benefit of all beings, and making that a solemn vow, then you become a bodhisattva. And it is something so wonderful. Anyone who does that is more than just a kind person. They are someone whose future is a light for all of the world. So this is our kind of snapshot of the bodhisattva. And we have to do the classical analysis of view. What's their view? What is their practice? What is their conduct? And then what is the result? Their view is not confined to suffering like the Arhat's view, and the causes of suffering, which are ego delusion and the mind poisons. Of course, that's there, and it's embodied in the 4 truths, the 4 great truths, the 4 truths of noble beings. But in Mahayana, the 4 great truths go a bit to the background. And what we bring to the 4 are what we call the 2 truths, relative and ultimate. It's not different, but it's a different view or vision of things. And the view is the simultaneity of relative and ultimate. Not that there's an ultimate over there somewhere, like we might think of heaven, or we might think of some kind of voidness, being the void man, and kind of that's the ultimate truth. And then here we are in a body down here in samsara. This is relative truth. And now, bye-bye relative truth. I'm just going into ultimate truth for a few moments. Excuse me, back in 5 minutes. Shunyata. No way. If ever you think of relative and ultimate as 2 separate things, you're wrong. You didn't get it. Even the words themselves, relative and ultimate, they have to go together. How can you have an ultimate of something if there isn't a something to have its ultimate? Otherwise, you don't need the word ultimate. And once you've got an ultimately, whatever it is, ultimately we're all Buddha, then why do we saying ultimate? Because relatively, there's something else going on. The words themselves show it's like 2 sides of a coin. It's even more than 2 sides of a coin. So unpacking that view of the 2 truths, what do we mean by relative and ultimate, and not falling into the trap of nihilism, where we think that shunyata, emptiness, means some ultimate state, which is just like empty space, void space, and so on. It's a lot of beautiful understanding, the two truths. The key to it is in one word: interdependence. And we had this in the Voidness for Dummies course. I think it was the very first one of these Zoom teachings. Because everything depends on other things to be what it is, because everything depends on other things to be what it is, nothing exists in its own right, independently, forever. That's it. If you've got it, you've just understood shunyata, you've understood the two truths. Everything. Now, what do we mean by everything? Everything. Everything that comes up in your mind stream, whether it seems out there, your experience of the world and other people, whether it seems like in here, your own mind experience of your mind, your feelings and so on. Everything is interdependent. It's triggered by other things. To be what it is depends on other things. So because of that dependence, you take away any of the things it depends on. It doesn't happen. It's not one thing. Like if you look at my shirt, Ken's shirt, okay, yellow shirt. There's something going on here. There's light in this room, which is bouncing off the shirt and coming into the camera, going over the airwaves, coming into your eyeball, triggering the nerves of your eyes, making something happen into your brain. And so your brain is experiencing yellow shirt. You take away any of that. I shut off the light. I turn off the internet connection. You close your eyelids. You inject yourself so that your optical nerve isn't transmitting to your brain. Or even if it's transmitting to your brain, you get distracted because the phone's ringing. Take away any one thing. So there isn't a yellow shirt. And maybe if a bumblebee came into this room and it's going here, it might see a green shirt as far as we're concerned. Everything is relative, depends on other things. In space, right now, in this moment. In time, through the power of karma and the mind stream. Because everything depends on something other. Nothing exists in its own right. So when the Buddha says it doesn't exist, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Boop, gone. Nothing there. It means there isn't anything that exists in a vacuum or by itself, with its own qualities. Unfortunately, our minds don't usually perceive this, so we solidify things into a self and others, and fix stories, and fix projections, fix cognitive patterns in our mind, and so on. So the Bodhisattva's understanding is of these two truths. Ultimately, nothing exists in its own right because relatively everything depends. It's all karma and the 12 links of interdependence, busy. And so, of course, with that view, one can understand how relatively suffering is produced and how relatively suffering can be got rid of. Whereas ultimately, the fact that none of it existed in its own right since the very outset is the truth that goes all the way through. So there is this Bodhisattva view. It is very deep. And when we unpack it, we start going through the various Mahayana views. Khenpo Sotim Jamso made a very excellent summary of graduated steps to understanding shunyata, voidness. He takes us through the four main areas of Buddhist view in all the traditions. And then in particular, we go through the Chittamatra, mind-only view, Yogacharyas, and so on, and the various traditions within that as an understanding of the two truths that work. And then we go to the Madhyamaka, middle way, and then through all the different types of Madhyamaka and their great teachers and interdependence, yes, but interdependence bang there, slap center right there? It's all interdependent. Or do we park interdependence and say, yes, but even that, what is interdependence? It's your mind thinking, oh, this depends on that, and that depends on this, and these are the 12 links, and blah, 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 blah. It's all mind stew and thought. So even interdependence is a kind of notion that humans can get their heads around when they don't understand a blooming thing, really, of what's actually going on. It's a mystery out there. And just everyone has their view, and that's what makes them who they are. But if you're looking for the right view, you never find it. There isn't a right view. There isn't a right blah, blah, blah that's the right blah, 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 because it's all blah, blah, blah. And that's all it is. So even if you view blah, blah, blah as not correct, you've still got a view that blah, blah, blah is not correct. You know, it gets mind-boggling. So when we get in the middle way, then we get the middle way. The best ones don't say a word. They can destroy any argument you bring forward. They're so brilliant. They say, and they destroy you with your own thinking. So if you say, yes, but, you know, Buddha taught this and everything's interdependent, they say, no, what you just said there, then how do you sort out this apparent contradiction in what you just said? Causes and effect. How can a cause be a cause if there's no effect yet? How can an effect be an effect when there's no cause to be seen because something happened ages ago? How can you put those two things together? And so on. They can take you apart mercilessly. This is why Manjushri has this razor-sharp sword. As soon as you come up with a blah, 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 Manjushri can reduce it to shreds. So when we look at the classical debates for this rather, I must say I'm fond of it, part of middle way Madhyamaka thinking. So when the frustrated adversary turns round and says, well then, what do you think? I mean, you've just destroyed me completely. What do you think? No answer. You think there's no answer. And I never said I thought anything. They're really good. They're really good. They're really good because their mind has seen through the power of concepts. And they know that concepts as relative truth can be very, very useful. But they know where concepts begin and they know where concepts end. And they know that the only way to get the real view, where your mind sees clearly, is through meditation, is through the lineage blessing, is through the transmission and the connection of your heart with Buddha mind, where the view beyond all words is just there, and nobody needs to say anything. It's just obvious. So we get various, and then when the middle way teachings went to Tibet, of course, Tibetans being Tibetans, bless them, then that evolves into, in the Kagyu tradition, some others, Zhongnampa, then what we call Rangtong, Shentong, about the very nature of shunyata, and even more confusing because 8th Karmapa was a bit more Rangtong than Shentong, but the 7th Karmapa, he was more Shentong than Rangtong. And so, oh gosh, what is our Karmapa's view? Khenpo Sotim Jamso told me about this. And he said, no, his view is relative. 7th Karmapa, with all the people around him, could see that they were getting too much into a sort of emptiness, voidness idea, that there was some ultimate truth apart, sort of feeling to what they're doing. And so he needed to ram home the Shentong, how Buddha nature is in everyone and is everywhere and in every moment. And then when the eighth Karmapa came along, people had gone too much the other way. They've made Buddha nature too much of a something, like God in other religions. And so put the brakes on, and you have to insist, okay, what is this Buddha nature? Look for it. What do you find? Can you find anything? Anything that you could say, there's my Buddha nature. Or I go into deep meditation, find your Buddha nature as something. You can't. So any view is a relative medicine that a great teacher uses for the ailment of thinking amongst the disciples, and to get them to sit on their butt and meditate and find the real truth, which is really, really where it's at. So, okay, we need to finish there today. And I think probably we do need to extend these 4 Dharmas to a 5th session so that we can look more thoroughly at the Bodhisattva path and still spend a bit of time at the end using the 4 Dharmas as a template for the Mahamudra path. So let me put you all. Okay, I think we've come to the end of yet another session. And let's dedicate anything that was good to all our fellow beings. Sonam diye tamche zikpani topneni pedranam pamchene jega naji palab trukpayi sipet sole drowa drowarisho janchub semcho rimpoche ma jepanam jejochi jepan nyampa me padam kongne kongdu pelwarisho. Okay, be safe, everybody, and see you soon.
Thanks, Ken. Draw now.
Bye-bye for now.
Thank you, Ken.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks,
Lovely
Ken.
to see you all.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you, Ken.
Bye.